Hello and welcome to Stuart Saturday Live Season 3, Episode 3, with me, your hostess, Andrea Zuvich, the 17th Century Lady. First of all, I'd like to thank Linda Porter for coming on the show last month to talk about the Stuarts. The day after that, the show was Mothering Sunday here in the UK, and my family took me down to Coventry, where we attended the original Reenactors Market, which ran from the 13th to the 15th of March. Now, this is an event at which many craftspeople come together who manufacture and supply historically accurate goods, and where I bought several items of clothing, including this black bodice by Sally Green, historical costume, and this dark blue skirt by Anne Laverick. Let's see if I can show you. I'll do it this way. My new shoes, were from Todd Booth of Fox Blade Trading and Reenactment Shoes. And this linen that's around my neck here, it's English Civil War era style kerchief band made by Bones and Roses, which arrived just yesterday. And I have commissioned a new 1630s dress from Joe Badger, and I'm really excited about this. And I'm looking forward to seeing that develop over the next few months. Now, this image here is from the original Reenactors Market, and I saw my books, Sex and Sexuality in Stuart Britain, stocked by the till. I was so excited, and so I signed it for them, and that was just thrilling. It was so nice to see so many familiar faces, and they do this event twice a year, and the next one is in November. So if you really like history, there are different kinds of historical periods there, and it's really fun. So if you haven't been there before, you should probably try to get to the next one. After that, my husband took us all to the Old Windmill pub in Coventry, and it was so lovely. And so if you're in Coventry, this is in a very historic area, and I believe it's from the 15th century. I'm not exactly sure when, but it was lovely, and it was the staff were very friendly, and it was dog friendly as well, and absolutely lovely. So I can't recommend that more highly. Um, well, now this month's guest is Professor Cordelia Beattie, the author of Medieval Single Women, The Politics of Social Classification in Late Medieval England, and editor of Married Women and the Law in Pre-Modern Northwest Europe, and Women in the Medieval World. She studied medieval and modern history at the University of Birmingham, then obtained an MA and a DPhil in medieval studies at the University of York. She was appointed lecturer in medieval history at Edinburgh, then promoted to senior lecturer and now professor of women's and gender history. She is the primary investigator on an AHRC funded project, Alice Thornton's books, Remembrances of a Woman's Life in the 17th Century. Thornton was a remarkable 17th century woman who lived from 1626 to 1707 and whose autobiography gives us fascinating insights into the tumultuous period in which she lived. Today, we'll learn about her life and legacy. Joining us live from Edinburgh, please welcome Professor Cordelia Beattie.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. So lovely to have you on the show. I've been a fan of your various social media accounts and the posts that you do about the life of this extraordinary woman. And her life encompassed a huge amount of history. She was born just into Charles I's reign and died during the reign of Queen Anne. And she lived through some of the most tumultuous times in British history, let alone 17th century history. Would you please tell us who she was, please?
Yeah, she's a member of the minor gentry in North Yorkshire. As you said, she lived through a very tumultuous period, and that's reflected in her autobiography. And really, that's what she's best known for. She was included in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography in 2004 as an autobiographer. So really, it's the fact that she wrote about her life in this period and her writings have survived that mean that we're still interested in her today.
That's brilliant. And of course, we can gather so much information about how people lived and what, their thoughts about life in general. And so for anyone who wants to know more about this time period, and in particular a woman's life, they can really learn a great deal from her autobiography. Would you please tell us more about her childhood? Like, who are her parents, for example? I think we have a portrait here. Who's this?
Yeah, so that's her father. Well, I'll start with her mother. Her mother's Alice Osborne, daughter of Sir Stuart Osborne, who was from Kiverton in Yorkshire. But maybe better known was her mother's uncle, Sir Edward Osborne, who was a member of Parliament, but he becomes Vice President of the Council of the North from 1632 and was really running things when Wentworth was in Ireland. So he has a pivotal role during the First English Civil War. But her father was Christopher Wansford, and there's a number of portraits of him that survive. This is a photo of one of the 17th century portraits, still in private hands. And he was the son of Sir George Wansford. His father doesn't do very well in terms of money, lost most of it. So it's really for Christopher Wansford to build that back up. And he starts as an MP in Yorkshire in the 1620s, and that's when Alice was born.
So what was her childhood like?
Yeah, so she was born on the 13th of February 1626, and what you can see from this document, which is parish register for Kirklington, that she was baptized 6 days later. So she's described here as the daughter of Christopher Wansford. And I found this record, which is now still at North Yorkshire County Record Office in Northallerton. I found it particularly interesting because when Thornton writes about her life, she says she was baptized the day after her birth, which was very common for her children. So she maybe assumed that was the case for her. But we can see from the date given here that she was baptized, so that XIX, so the 19th of February, 6 days after her birth. So yeah, so I was just going on to say that Kirklington Hall, where she was born, is still standing, but it's been much modernized, so you don't really get a sense of the 17th century building from looking at that. But she was baptized at St Michael's Church in Kirklington, which I think we'll have a photo of that one coming up.
That's it.
But yeah, that's St Michael's there.
Wow, lovely.
So Alice spent her early years in Kirklington, but she was also going back and forth to London because her father was a member of Parliament, as I said. And she has some good stories about her time in London and in Kent. One that sticks in my mind was when she was 6 years old, and she says the house next door was set on fire, and her nurse kind of carries her out to safety. And her parents weren't there at the time because they were at the court of Charles and Henrietta. So you can really get that sense that Christopher Wansford's star was on the up in this period.
Wow. So, it's an interesting thing for her to remember. Wow. So Kirklington, the location of this, for people who are not familiar with where certain places are, is that in the north of Yorkshire, or
Yes, yeah, also in North Yorkshire. So that's family seat of the Wansford family.
Oh, right. So not too far from where I am. I'm in Derbyshire. Um, so yes, um, eventually the family moved to Ireland in the 1630s. Why did they move there, and how did that go?
Yeah, so her father was friends with Thomas Wentworth,
Mhm.
and he had been made Lord Deputy of Ireland in the early 1630s. And Christopher accompanies him. He's made Master of Rolls. And after Alice's mother has had a, another child, John, and recovers from that birth, the whole family follow. And we hear a bit about Alice's childhood in Dublin. She talks about being educated alongside Wentworth's daughters, Anne and Arabella. And she's obviously being brought up in a slightly kind of better kind of circumstances than she was when she was in England. She says that she learned French, singing, dancing, silk work, and other accomplishments suitable to the
Right.
status of the Wentworth daughters. So she's really kind of quite
Yes,
proud of
certainly.
that period of time.
um, those are all accomplishments that many affluent young ladies would have wanted to have. So it's interesting to hear that as well. Um, so, like many families, she experienced several tragedies in her family. What were some of these, and do we know how she coped with them?
Yeah, so I probably should say that kind of one of the earliest ones she talks about is the death of her father in 1640 in Ireland. It was quite
Mm.
sudden. He was just 48 years of old, and he'd recently
Wow.
been appointed or deputy of Ireland because Wentworth was out of favour, had been recalled to England.
Hmm.
And the following year, there's kind of the Irish Rebellion, and that's when they kind of flee. But I think the kind of death of her father, she takes that quite hard, and that's something that we see in her kind of writings. And I would say that her memoirs in general do focus quite a lot on death. So besides her father's early death, she writes about that of her sister, her oldest brother. Um, but
Oh.
she probably writes more about those people who died around the time that she was writing. So her mother,
Mm.
her
Right.
husband, and her children.
Mm.
And that was particularly sad. She gave birth 9 times, but only 3 of those children made it to adulthood.
Oh
Um,
dear.
and
Yeah.
so she does write about being ill with grief, but she also talks about how this must have been God's plan, and she records their deaths with kind of accompanied prayers in her books.
Mm.
So we do get a real sense of how she felt about those deaths.
I see. That is fairly typical of the time, because it was a time of very high infant mortality. And I recall John Evelyn writing similarly in his diaries. Um, uh, it's very sad, all of that. Eventually, the family returned to England, and could you would you please tell us what prompted that return? Was it the death of the father, and perhaps the situation in Ireland at the time, and how they ended up moving to Hipswell, please?
Yeah, so initially, her mother decides to stay in Dublin against all advice. She thinks it's safer than England, where fighting has broken out.
Mm.
But in October of 1641, there's the Irish Rebellion,
Yeah.
and the Wansford family, as English Protestants, who Wansford was quite a big landowner. He'd taken over a lot of land from Gaelic families when he moved there. They're not particularly popular, and
Mm.
Alice and her mother, they go and shelter in Dublin Castle for a number of days while the rebellion's breaking out. And so once things calm down, they decide that Dublin is no longer safe for them, and they sail back to England. And initially, they live in Chester. They've got some friends there, and they stay there for a year or two until that city becomes under siege from the parliamentarians. And it's really at that point that Alice's mother thinks, I have a jointed property in North Yorkshire. So this is Hipswell Hall that you've got this lovely photo here of Hipswell Hall. So there's a GW over the door, which is Christopher Wansford father when he was doing alterations to this property in the late 16th century. But they want to head back there, but it takes quite a long time to make that journey. That they do have kind of servants helping kind of carry their goods, but there's quite a lot of soldiers in that intervening kind of bit of land. So it's about 1644 when we know that they are back at Hipswell. And again, while they're living there, they do have to share the property initially with Scottish soldiers that they're billeted within the house. Alice's mother won't let any kind of captains stay. She's a bit worried about what might happen. She's got a teenage daughter, but she does let other soldiers stay in the property and elsewhere on the land. So they kind of, it's not quite a safe haven when they arrive back at Hipswell.
Wow. And Hipswell, again, is North Yorkshire. And wow, to have to go back to a family home and to have to share it with soldiers, that was the case for many places with these kinds of homes during the civil wars. What was it like there? I mean, did they see, were there any particularly large or well-known battles in the area?
Yeah, the Battle of Muston Moor is the most significant one in that area, but also for the family. So Alice's younger brother, Christopher, was actually studying in York at this period, and her older brother decides that it's not safe. He's going to go and collect him. Right. And this is kind of the family story anyway, and they get seen by others. So after the royalists lose that battle, it's said that George took part because he's been seen on the battlefield. He says he was just passing through on the way to get his brother. But as a result of that accusation, the Wansfords have their family property confiscated. So Kirklington Hall is confiscated in the 1640s. So yeah, they're definitely kind of implicated in all of this.
Well, again, it's very, very indicative of all the turmoil of this time. So everyone was feeling it in one way or another. Her autobiography is, of course, quite a story in itself. Would you please tell our audience about that and perhaps when she started writing it?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say, so lots of people know about the autobiography of Alice Thornton. As I mentioned before, that's why she's in the Dictionary of Oxford, the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. But I think I didn't really realise until around 2018 that there is no single autobiography. I've been looking at that Certainty Society volume, and what becomes clear is that the Victorian editor had taken 3 books of her life. So she calls them 3 books of her life when she leaves them to her daughter when she dies. And he's kind of put them together to make a composite edition. So you get this idea of one autobiography. It's largely book 1, which was a chronological book that starts in 1626, goes through to her husband's death in 1668. And there's bits where the editor has put in bits from book 2 and book 3 where they add extra information. And there's a bit in the notes that says there was a 4th manuscript called A Very Small Book, he said, and that's one that we now know as the Book of Remembrances, and he quotes passages there. So, as I said, I'd used this text but hadn't really thought about how it was put together until the book that's on your screen, this tiny book, which is the Book of Remembrances. I got a text from my dad who'd gone to the pub for an early evening drink and said, would you be interested in the diary of Alice Thornton, a 17th century woman? And I was thinking, like, why is he asking me this? And he sends me a photo of a manuscript that he's been shown in the pub. And
No
obviously
way.
I was very excited, slightly worried.
Yeah.
He's in a pub, and not used to kind of seeing a manuscript in a pub.
Yeah.
But I asked for a bit more information in terms of its size, how many pages it had, because I did a kind of quick search while he was kind of messaging me, and I saw there's a website called the Catalogue of English Literary Manuscripts,
Hmm.
and it mentioned that there were multiple manuscripts, but that a number of them were still missing. So there were
Wow.
two that had been acquired by the British Library in 2009, and that was book one and book three. But the middle one, book two, and the smaller one, the Book of Remembrances, they just said they're untraced. And it became clear that this one in the pub was the Book of Remembrances. And so I was obviously very excited about that. I asked if I could come and see it. And my dad's neighbor, who owned this manuscript, agreed. And it turns out he was a member of the Comber family. And when I'm doing my research, I then found out that Alice's daughter had married into the Comber family, and Alice had left her manuscripts to her daughter. So they'd stayed in this one manuscript, at least, had stayed in Comber hands
Oh, I
right up
see.
to 2018. And
Wow.
yeah, so this is my dad's local pub. This is in Ludlow in Shropshire.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can see the kind of medieval gate there on the left,
Yes.
and then yeah, another nice old pub if you fancy going
Yes.
for a
And
pint next time you have a look.
yeah, yeah, I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a moment because you sent over the images, and I had to ask you. I was like, "Where is this pub?" Because I wasn't sure, and then you said Ludlow, and I was like, "Oh, because we used to live near Ludlow. We lived in Clungunford, so it's a little hamlet near there, and so it's near Craven Arms as well, and so there's a lot of 17th century history as well. So it's usually associated with the medieval period. But the funny thing is, when you told me, and it's like, oh yes, of course, because my family and I have been in there a few times. So and my husband used to have a few pints. You might have even seen your dad there.
But
So that's
no
right.
Thornton manuscript.
No, okay, sadly.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's really what that got me looking into the Comber family history,
Mhm.
because partly just I wanted to give a bit of a thank you to Patrick Comber, who was going to let me look at the Thornton documents that he had.
Mhm.
And in that search, I saw the Durham Cathedral had been given some papers in the 1960s called the Dean Comber Papers,
Right.
and they hadn't been properly catalogued. I think people weren't particularly interested in researching this 17th century. He was the Dean of Durham Cathedral.
Oh.
And it mentioned just in the brief summary that they included a book of his wife, Alice.
Mhm.
And so this would have been Alice Thornton Comber. But I kind of just had that sense like there's a missing manuscript. This could be the other Alice Thornton manuscript. And if not, if her
Wow.
daughter also writes about her life, that's great anyway. So yeah, this I headed to Durham to see what they had, and the day started just going through a box of these papers,
Mhm.
and it became clear from the box that it really was what going to, there was a list of the contents, and it said as
Yeah.
part of Alice Thornton's memoirs. So I'm going through all these bits going, what part? What part? Couldn't find it. So when I went back in the afternoon, they said all they had was a box of Dean Comber's printed books. And I was like, well, I'll have a look. Again, I could tell Patrick something about his ancestor. And
Mhm.
the second book out of the box was the one that was just shown before, book two. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it was kind of another of the missing ones. And this one, because there was a microfilm copy of the Book of Remembrances, but this one, all we knew about its contents was what the Victorian editor had included, and he'd included a minimal amount of this text.
Right.
So I was really excited to look at this one in particular.
Yeah.
Um,
This is so
yeah, so
cool.
and obviously by that point I've seen a bit of the Book of Remembrances, which was the next image that's coming up. So I could recognize the hand, and obviously from the 30 Society edition I kind of knew some of the contents. So this is
Wow.
the inside of the book that went to the pub, which was in its own kind of box at the time, and it was labelled as the Diary of Mrs. Alice Thornton, and it had these dates. So these are the dates because she's saying that she was born in 1625. So this is kind of the
Yeah.
old dating because she was born in
Yeah.
February, and the calendar year would have changed in March.
Yes,
And
of course. Yeah.
it just mentions 1661 just because she numbers a lot of the pages. So
Mhm.
obviously someone looking at it was like, okay, that's when she's writing. But I mean, obviously that kind of categories like autobiography, diary, they don't quite neatly map onto our own sense of these texts. So I think what you can see for this page here is that she has her own title.
Mhm.
So she calls it a book of remembrances, and so that's the title that we use today. So and
Yes.
obviously the fuller version of the remarkable deliverances of myself, husband, and children, with their births and so on. So she's kind of does start by noting basically births, deaths, and some other kind of key events like marriages and illnesses.
Right.
And it's only really kind of later on that we start to get more detailed passages, I'd say around the time her mother dies in 1659.
Wow. But I think that it's so lovely. I mean, I've been in nowhere near as exciting situations as this. To discover something like this, I mean, that must be absolutely the best thrill for a researcher to be able to find something like this, and it's absolutely thrilling. So I bet it's one of the best natural highs in the world, I think. Um, and it's just lovely to see this writing as well. A book of remembrances. I think that's so just beautiful, and the handwriting is also very lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, she
Yeah.
kind of that's her neat hand. I will say that towards the
Okay.
back of the book that it's a bit more scrawly. But yeah, in general, it's quite a legible hand. And at the bottom there, that's her monogram. So she's got that kind of AWT, but it's kind of interlaced.
I see. Wow. Really nice. Right. So who did she marry, and yeah, you mentioned the children,
Mhm.
and what kind of life did she have with her husband and their family?
Yeah, so if you recall, I said that the Wallingford family estates were confiscated,
Yes.
and as part of the family's attempts to get them back, they're having to negotiate with the parliamentarians.
Mm.
And the head of the local committee, Richard Darley, says, "Oh, I've got a nephew. Would your daughter Alice be interested in him?"
Oh.
So effectively, William Thornton is suggested to Alice, um, and so there's a kind of a sense in which this would work for the family. But yeah, he has parliamentarian kind of background with his family. They're
Mhm.
also Presbyterian. Thornton is Church of England, so
Oh.
she's not initially very keen. She doesn't actually want to marry at all. She just wants to dedicate herself to God. But she has a chat with him, and he promises that if they have children, they can be brought up in the Church of England, and that's kind of enough for her. So that's how that marriage comes about. I mean, he's not in terms of the men who are interested in her, he doesn't have the most money, but he does have that important political connection at a time when her family are not doing very well. So her older brother sadly drowns crossing the River Swale in 1651. So there's a sense in which Alice now and her mother, like, they really need to look out for themselves, that the younger brother is going to inherit things, and they're obviously not that close. So that's when she marries William, and I've mentioned they go on to have 9 children.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think for the first couple of books, you do get the impression that this is a marriage that's full of love. But I think in two of the other books, I think she finds some things out after he died in terms of kind of debts. So things like he mortgaged the lands that were meant to be intended for her daughters. He also gambled on horses. So I think in some of the later writings, she doesn't seem as happy with her husband as in some of the early ones.
Right. Oh, I see. Wow. So, in terms of her, maybe we could think about her final years. Wait, no. Actually, you sent over another interesting portrait. Who was this, and how does he figure to Alice's life, please?
Yeah, so this is Thomas Comber, who goes on to become the Dean of Durham Cathedral. But this portrait is in her local church, Stonegrave, where he comes as a cleric. And when I think Thornton loves having him nearby, they talk a lot about religion. She gets the Eucharist from him quite often. But this leads to a big scandal, which is something that maybe prompts the writing of some of her books. It exercises quite a lot. So rumors circulate about Alice Thornton and Thomas Comber. He's quite a bit younger, and he is engaged to her daughter, and her daughter is around the time that the engagement starts, she's about 12 years old.
Wow.
So considered very young. And when William dies and he hasn't made a will and there's a lot of debts, Alice marries her daughter off to Comber really quickly, so within a month or two, in order that her daughter can access her inheritance, which would be at age 21 or when she marries. So she marries age 14, and lots of people don't approve, and all of these rumors circulating are that Alice really wants him for herself.
Oh, wow. And what are your thoughts about that? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, we largely, obviously, are going with what Alice Thornton says about this, and there is one other account giving the other side, which is her niece by marriage called Anne Danby, who's one of the people who spreads the rumor. She has left a letter, again, it's at the North Yorkshire County Record Office, where she talks about this a bit. But I don't think there is a scandalous relationship. I think it really is about religion, that they are kind of very close. And particularly when her husband dies, so Thomas Comber is living with them, and she kind of turns to Comber to kind of help educate her children, talks about kind of catechizing them, making sure that they are brought up correctly. And I think at this stage, it's really about looking after her daughter. So in the same way that Alice had to marry William because of family circumstances, I think that's what's going on with her daughter's marriage as well.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Though, the other side, perhaps, when we were working on the images, I said to my husband, "Oh, he's rather handsome, though, this guy."
Yeah.
So, he wasn't an ugly man. So that probably didn't help matters with all the rumors. So
yeah, so in the Anne Danby letter, she does seem to hint that there's something about Comber and another woman, and that's why she thinks that Comber isn't suitable for Alice Thornton's daughter. So she presents herself as not being a troublemaking gossip, but as someone who's really trying to look out for the family by saying, I don't think this is a good match.
I see. Yeah, that's all sorts. You can see it in various different ways, I suppose. So do you think, or do we know that whether this man had a happy marriage with her daughter? Do we? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to. So they They do move to Durham, although they seem to spend quite a lot of time still at their family home, which is East Newton and Rydale.
Okay.
I mean, Comber actually, so lots of the men in the family die early. So Comber also dies before Alice Thornton.
Oh,
So he dies in 1699. So at that point, the property becomes Alice Comber's, so Thornton's daughter. So they get to live together, and Thornton can stay there until she dies. I mean, she's nearly 80 when she dies, so she lives to a
wow.
ripe old age. But yeah, Alice and Thomas Comber have a number of children together. It's notable that they don't have any children for a number of years, and
Right.
we know that other women who marry so early that sometimes they delay consummating the marriage because
Yes.
of the risks of giving birth at that young age.
Yeah.
So it might be that while they married in order that Alice Comer could get her inheritance, that they might not have been living together as man and wife for a number of years.
Yes, and that makes sense. And there is this idea that some people run away with, that the people in the Stuart period sometimes would get married at a very young age. The Stuarts in general did not see that as a particularly healthy, healthy way of living. And they thought it was quite damaging to young people to consummate, to have any kind of sexual relations until later. So that really does make sense, because they might have, indeed, they might have waited, and that really would make it all make sense. So, yes, I think we have an image of a memorial coming up next. Let's see if we can get that up. So, what is this from?
Yeah, so this is a memorial plaque, a painted plaque that Alice commissioned for her husband when he
Mhm.
died in 1668. And it, compared to some of the other memorial plaques in this church, so this is also at Stonegrave, um, it's obviously much cheaper to produce. And this is because she didn't have much money, because William
Mm,
had left them in debt.
mm,
But this is
yes.
still on the wall in the church in Stonegrave.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is quite lovely, and it's nice that it's still in existence. But so he died in the late 1660s. So following the Restoration, did they did their fortunes improve or not?
No, so partly as so they married in 1651, because William had those
Yeah.
parliamentarian connections, and
Yes.
so with the Restoration, Alice and family, the Wansford family, are really quite happy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story that she tells. So she's pregnant in 1660,
Mm-hmm.
and she's at this point living at her aunt and uncle's house in Richmond. And so they've been kicked out of Hipswell by her younger brother, who inherited it when her mother died.
Oh.
And Alice's aunt says, is having a conversation with Alice about what would you call the child if it's a boy? Why don't you call him Charles after
Mm-hmm.
the king? And
Oh.
this was just before Charles has actually kind of come back, but that's kind of on the cards. And William won't have it, and he says, if you call this child Charles, he won't inherit a foot of my land.
Whoa.
And Alice kind of says, oh, I don't know why he said that. I didn't ask him. And it's just like, well, presumably he still has parliamentarian sympathies. So you get the kind of
Right.
sense that there is that kind of tension, but it's
Yes.
not something that she dwells on.
All right. Yeah, I was wondering about that, because many people either had their fortunes improve or worsen, and so it was interesting to consider how it affected this particular family. Um, I'll have to ask what some of our viewers may be wondering. Is there a surviving portrait of Alice? Do we know whether she sat for a portrait?
So we haven't managed to trace one, but there was at least one in existence. And Jackson, who was the named editor of the 1875 autobiography, he says that he saw a portrait that was still in Pomber family hands at that point.
Wow.
He says, I can't think of the exact quote, but basically he's kind of saying she's not much to look at. He's quite rude. But he says that she's wearing widow's weeds. So it's presumable, well, we think that means it's likely painted after her husband's death, although we had someone working on our project who was looking into other 17th century portraits, and she found a number that were commissioned by husbands of their wives in kind of widow's garb as a kind of a memory. So they were already thinking about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that is, I mean, I don't know whether William Thornton's the kind of person who would have spent money on that, but yeah, I would love to find it, but yeah, no, I don't know where that is.
Oh, well, that would be something else you might have to discover. That's brilliant, though. It's to think that there might be a portrait of her somewhere out there, maybe hanging in someone's house right now, or
Maybe.
Yeah. Right. So, could you tell me more about the project that you are part of right now? What are you? What stage are you at with it, and what do you hope to get with it?
Yeah. So the project ran from 2021 until early 2025. So that was a project that was funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council.
Okay.
So that is complete.
Right.
And the main thing that we promised we would do with that funding was a digital edition of all 4 manuscripts. So one that I found at Durham Cathedral, one that was then in private hands, but then was gifted to Durham Cathedral, so it's now there as well, and the 2 that were acquired by the British Library. So we've done that. So what we did was called kind of a semi-diplomatic transcription. So we have largely kind of transcribed what's there, but we expanded some abbreviations and so on. But then we also modernized the text. So most people would find it easier to read a modernized version of her text. So effectively, if you go to the website, there are these 8 different books that you could read, the 4 semi-diplomatic ones and the 4 modernized. And we did this online edition. Partly it's free, everyone can look at it, but also it's fully searchable. And not just kind of a keyword search, but we did some kind of tagging. So I had 2 postdoctoral fellows on the project, Sharon Howard and Joanne Edge, and they did a lot of this work. So they tagged places, people, and events. So if you're interested in someone who lived in this period, you can type in their name and see if she mentions them. If you're interested in a particular place, again, you can look that up. And we have mini biographies or summaries of some of the buildings and places that appear in there. And by events, I mentioned that she's written 4 texts, and that the 19th century editor just thought that they kind of were a bit repetitive, and he kind of spliced them together. So what we wanted to do is think about, so we've allowed people to read them as she wrote them. So you could read all 4 books, one after the other. But what you could do is think about why she retells certain events and whether she changes them over time. So we tagged an event, and if you look for that, some of them appear in all 4 books, and then you can pull them up on the screen. You can, if you're on a big screen, you can have 4 side by side, and you can see what changes and maybe think about why. So we were interested in when were they written, why were they written, why do they change. So the digital edition had those research questions behind it, and what we're doing now that the money's gone, myself and my co-investigator Suzanne Shrill, we're still working on this. We both work at the University of Edinburgh, so we have a collection of essays that will be coming out hopefully later this year, which is
brilliant.
So a number of people who came to a conference we had in Edinburgh. So it'll be kind of so Thornton and religion, Thornton and medicine, Thornton and the law, Thornton and colonialism, Thornton and dreams, all sorts of different topics that are covered in the books. And we have various experts who we gave advanced access to our edition so that they could be working on that. And we hope to kind of get it out around the time of the edition, but we're just slightly behind on that. But yeah, so we're carrying on with the research into Alice Thornton. And as you mentioned, I've got the kind of the social media accounts.
Oh, yes, so good.
Yeah, well, a big strand of the project was public engagement. We really wanted to kind of communicate what we were doing outside of universities and make the life of Alice Thornton better known. And I mean, I think there's just some great stories in there. And as you said at the beginning, it's a great source of the history of this period, and particularly kind of the social history of women's lives. She talks a lot about childbirth and childhood illnesses and so on. So I think, we're continuing with the public engagement side as well.
That's great, because personally I can't get enough of them, because your posts are so good. They're so informative, and they're just absolutely fascinating. So for those of you in the audience who have yet to encounter these social media posts, I really do recommend them. You mainly use Facebook and Instagram, is that correct?
Yeah, we have a Blue Sky account as well. We kind of, I think we found that a lot of academic users were moving from X to Blue Sky, so we've set up home there as well. But yeah, I think the Instagram works really well for the images that we have, both of we use photos of the documents and the books, but also 17th century paintings or photos of places. So some of the images that we've shared today are the kinds of things that we use on Instagram. And I usually use the format of kind of the on this day kind of posts, because Thornton dates a lot of her events. So that's something that we kind of pick up on in those posts.
Yeah, well, that's great, and it's definitely a good idea. I was wondering, you're doing a lot of work into this, and what are some other ways in which her life is being re-examined and reinterpreted?
Yeah. So this image is of a friend of mine, Debbie Cannon, who's a writer and actor. So around the time, well, not long after I'd found the second manuscript, I saw a call for the funding for the Being Human Festival called Discoveries and Secrets. And I thought, okay, that's kind of perfect. I've had a discovery and I'm keeping a secret, and this was something that I might kind of share with this audience. And I was thinking about what might be an interesting way to do it that would reach a wider audience than just me talking about it. And I had seen Debbie do a one-woman play, and so I just said to her, would you like to do a one-woman play about Alice Thornton? And at this point, she knew nothing about Alice Thornton, and she just said yes, which is typical Debbie. And so the first version of the play that we did in 2019, it's called The Remarkable Deliverances of Alice Thornton. So we took the kind of, so I think I'd pitched it as being about kind of 20 deliverances from death, because she has all these funny stories about how she nearly dies but doesn't. So some of them quite serious, but some of them are sort of, I would say, a bit more kind of comedy. She sort of chokes on a bit of fish or something like that, and it's just like she makes quite a big deal about it. But then Debbie, when I gave her some more material, she decided that the scandal would make a great hook. So she sets the play on the day of her husband's funeral, but worrying about what everyone's saying about her, because these rumors are all circulating.
Right.
And we did this for 2 nights in Edinburgh as part of the festival, and we did a question and answer session afterwards to talk about the project. And the feedback that we got was people want to know more about Anne Danby and like, does Anne Danby leave an account and so on. And I knew that she did, but at this point we hadn't done that research. So when I was putting in for the funding with Suzanne Trill, we decided that we would make that part of our public engagement strand. So we said, you know, we want to pay Debbie to kind of revise the script using some of our new research, and we'll perform that play again. And our project partner was Durham Cathedral, so we were going to perform it for the first time at Durham Cathedral.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
for that version of the play, Debbie also has the character of Anne Danby, so she kind of does both Thornton and Danby.
Oh, cool.
And, you know, kind of Danby is kind of Thornton's nemesis, but like her polar opposite. So, you know, one's this kind of chaste, pious widow, and the other one is this kind of, well, she's kind of a separated woman, but yeah, kind of, you know, chatting up lots of men, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So yeah, so there's kind of a sense in which obviously our research fed into the play, but also I think the way that Debbie interpreted what we gave her made us look at Thornton's writings and other sources quite differently as well. So it's been a really interesting way to kind of think about Thornton.
Oh, I love it. I love everything to do with the theater and drama, and I think this is wonderful. I wish I could have seen that. Let's go back to Alice's final years, please. Let's like what was her what were her years like at the end?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because she doesn't write about them. So the books all stop around 1669, the year after her husband died. But from examining those manuscripts and the odd reference in there, we can see that she was writing book 2 and book 3 in the 1680s, the 1690s, but she doesn't tell us about that. But we, as part of the project, we went to a number of archives and found letters. So she's still writing letters. I think the latest one we've got is from 1705. So again, that's at Northallerton.
Right.
And there's a copy of her will, which she again wrote in 1705. And that the probate copy is at the Borthwick Institute in York. So in both of the letter and the will, although she's writing them in 1705, she is still mentioning that she spent a lot of money on Anne Danby and her family and that she wants it back.
Oh dear.
So I think while we were kind of reading the books thinking like, why is she not moving on? Like she really didn't move on. Like she goes, she dies being cross with Anne Danby and wanting her money back.
Oh dear.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of what we kind of can see from those later years, we can see that she struggled. So I mentioned that, so the oldest daughter marries, but obviously the heir, the Thornton heir was going to be Robert. Robert goes to university, gets into lots of debt, and he's bailed out by Anne Danby's son. So you know, there's a kind of he gets a bit of kind of payback, but he dies in 1692 before he marries. He dies at Durham Cathedral. He's staying with Alice and Thomas Comber. So at that point, the Thornton line is extinct. And in order for Alice to carry on living where she is, her sons-in-law, so her other daughter Catherine has also married. They effectively take over all the properties, and they give Thornton a pension on which to live. And Thomas Comber has got the family home, but he lets her live there. So she's managing, but she's not thriving in this period. She's really reliant on her sons-in-law, and I think Thomas Comber in particular, because Catherine's first husband dies and Catherine remarries without getting her mum's approval. Her mum really doesn't approve, partly because the family of the first husband are essentially giving her half a pension, so she's really worried about that.
Right.
So yeah, we have enough letters between all of these key parties that we get a sense of what her life was like in those later years, but she doesn't, well, she hasn't written a book that survives about that period.
I see. Do you think there could have been something like that? Do you think?
Well, so there are internal references in the books to other books that she wrote, books and meditations, and
Right.
there's so the Comber family, who got all the papers, a number of the later descendants wrote histories, and there's one who tried to write a kind of life of Alice Thornton, which is at Yale University, so it's not a published manuscript. And so I was reading a copy of that, and he had access to a source that we don't have, which seems to be about a later period, because he says that she wrote up to the period in which basically Robert died and Catherine remarried.
Oh.
So yeah, so there was an account, but
that's tantalizing.
Yeah, so that was
dear.
in the 18th century that he read it. So but when Jackson was looking at sources in the 1870s, he only mentions the 4 manuscripts.
I see. Ooh. That makes someone might have that too.
Yeah.
Wow.
As I say, my co-investigator Suzanne Troll, she's really hopeful that these other books and meditations will be found.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. And here we have another image of a church. This is beautiful. Where's this, please?
So that's Stonegrave Church. So that's her local church to East Newton, which is their family home from 1662 onwards. So inside, that's where you find that memorial to William Thornton, and there are other family memorials in that church. And that's the one where Thomas Comber was the rector for a period of time. So you could walk from East Newton Hall to Stonegrove Church. I think she says it kind of takes an hour. I think maybe an hour. I think she goes around a long way. I went in the car. It didn't seem that far.
Right. Oh, it'd be nice to dip back in time and see how the everyday movements were then. So there, I believe we have another image. No, I think we.
Yeah, so that's we've gone back to the plaque. So that's inside Stonegrave Church.
Inside.
So that's the memorial plaque. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, so there isn't one surviving for Alice Thornton. Apparently there was a stone in the church, quite a simple stone that said Madam Thornton, which is how she's referred to in that parish register, which notes her burial. But the church was changed quite a lot in the Victorian period, and they kind of leveled the floor, so quite a lot of the monuments, the kind of graves that were on the floor, and now underneath it, I think.
All right. Okay. I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to turn our attention to you now, if that's okay. I'd like to know what first got you interested in history.
So my dad was a history teacher in a school. So
nice.
I think from a young age, lots of holidays in the UK were to kind of castles and museums, and I always liked to go and buy the replica coins or whatever it was. So I think I always had a bit of an interest in history, and that carried on at school, although then it was largely modern political history that was taught.
Right.
So it's really, I think, at university where you get that chance to try different kinds of history and find out what you like, that I realized that I liked pre-modern history, I liked social history, and that's when I first really learned about women's history. So yeah.
Fantastic. And you've done a great deal of work in medieval history. And what about that really got your attention?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I went to the University of Birmingham, and I think, well, I didn't know at the time that the kind of this foremost experts in medieval social history, particularly on kind of peasants and so on, were working there. And so I ended up taking their classes. I really loved the way that they taught. And and they enabled me to also think about women in those sources. So I really just got kind of hooked from then. And I think I liked the fact that there wasn't much written about some of the topics that I wanted to do. So I think my undergraduate dissertation was on medieval prostitution. So I knew I wanted to write about prostitution, but there seemed to be quite a lot on more modern history. So I kind of deliberately picked something that I couldn't find much on. And it just carried on from there.
I see. And what was it about Alice and her life that made you want to research her?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm honest, it was kind of the discovery. I think, like you were saying, it's really rare that you find a manuscript in private hands, or that you find one that's not being catalogued. So I think kind of finding both, there was no way I was not going to work on it. I mean, I had actually taught a bit of Alice Thornton before, and I liked the material because there was so much about, as I said, like things like pregnancy and childbirth, whereas in my medieval sources, there's less detailed accounts. So so I was really excited about that. But I think I also recognized, because that it was a kind of a bit of a jump for me. I was at that point working on women in 16th century Scotland, but a colleague and friend, Suzanne Trill, had been working on 17th century women's writings for years. She edited the life writings of Anne Lady Hackett. So I happened to meet her on the bus when I was coming back from Durham when I found the second manuscript. So at an early stage, I told her, and she was very excited as well. And she was like, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" And I was like, I think we an edition would be great, like a big project. I think we could get some money." And she was on board, and I think I definitely needed her to be on board because she's an experienced editor. So we kind of came up with the big project together. I think without that kind of combination, I probably would have only done something small. So I did write an article quite early on for Notes and Queries about finding the two manuscripts. But the whole big project was very much a collaborative work. And then the two of us, we hired Sharon Howard and Joanne Edge, which really enabled us to do the kind of the tagging, which I think there's so much work goes into making a digital edition, which I think we're aware of some of it, but maybe not as much as when we started. We were like, oh my god, what have we taken on?
And in this image we have we see you working, examining a book. I'd like to know, what are your favorite things about researching in an archival setting?
Well, that's book 2, so that's one that Durham Cathedral took for the kind of the announcement that they had this manuscript. I think I guess it's kind of when you kind of, basically when you go to an archive, there is quite a lot of just going through things to see what's there. And I think, I don't know, I don't mind that, but I think it's when you're going through and then you find something. It's those moments that keep you going and keep going back. And you always find things that you weren't expecting. Like, you maybe go in thinking, oh, I'm looking for this, but you might find something else while there, which leads you in a completely different direction. So I think that really, I think there's no substitute for going to the archive and going through the things yourself. I mean, when I look at catalogues, I always find something, but when you're there and you can go through the boxes, when it just says a box of whatever, it's kind of what's in the box, that's what's exciting.
And I love it when you go to you're in an archive and you've requested something, and whoever's there says, oh, I don't think there's anything interesting in here for you, but then you find something that's amazing, and you tell them, you're like, actually, this was in here and that was really good. So I find it all really, really exciting, and I really enjoy my trips to any archives. anyway. Um, so I love to ask this for all of my guests. Now, this doesn't have to just be between 1603 and 1714, but if you were planning a fantasy dinner party with Stuart era figures, who would you invite? What would you serve? And who would you sit next to?
Okay, so I think because I'm still obsessed with Thornton, and there's so much that I'm never going to be able to kind of pin down just from reading her books. I think I'm going to have an all-female dinner party, and I'm going to invite Alice Thornton. I'm going to invite Anne Danby.
Oh dear.
And yeah, it's going to be a lively dinner party. I'm sitting next to Anne. She seems a lot of fun, so I'm definitely sitting next to Anne. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to invite so Daphne, who's Alice Thornton's loyal servant, who'd worked with her mother, you know, keeps coming back later in life when she's got her own household. So Daphne's going to be there to keep Alice Thornton, you know, happy. I think I need Alice Comber, Alice's daughter, to come so we can, you know, really find out what's going on with that marriage, the scandal. And then for another one on Anne Danby's side, there's her friend who she met in Virginia, who also seems to be interested in Thomas Comber. Just trying to think, what was her name? Martha Batt. Martha Batt, I would ask her as well. So yeah, it's going to be the six of us, and we're going to chat, and we're going to find out what really happened in the late 1660s that made these women fall out so spectacularly.
Yes. Oh, I'd like to be there too. All right. Well, what would you serve to these?
What would I serve?
Ladies and because that could make some trouble too if you serve them something they won't like.
Yeah. So, and actually, this question of like a Thornton themed meal is something that a few of us on the project have discussed before, because there are some funny kind of food related stories in Thornton's books. So our starter is going to be melon. And this is because when I mentioned earlier about her uncle, Edward Osborne, so she tells us that he dies from eating a surfeit of melons. The melons were too cold. They were grown in Yorkshire. That's probably the problem. But what I'm going to do is, so the early modern physicians kind of say, you know, melons, they're kind of cold and moist. That's why they're dangerous. Right. But they say you can have a corrective, so like something kind of salty. So if you serve melon with Parma ham and cheese, so a kind of classic, that would, you know, keep the early modern doctors happy. So yeah, Joanna Edge on the project gave me that tip. So that's going to be our starter. So hopefully no one is going to die from a surfeit of melon.
Hopefully not.
And the main course is going to be fresh oysters. And this is because in that one letter from Anne Danby, around the time that they fell out, she said that she sent her aunt Thornton 100 fresh oysters because she knew her aunt loved them, and she was obviously trying to get back in her good books. She says that Alice returned the letter and said, "Never write to me again," but she didn't return the oysters. So she obviously did love the oysters. So you can maybe kind of get them to make friends over eating oysters.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I thought definitely not lobster, because she does tell she gets very sick when her aunt gives her lobster, and that makes it into the play. I think Debbie says something like, you know, beware a dish set before you by family, because she's had this vomiting after eating some uncooked lobster. So yeah, so no lobster. So we've got the melon and then the oysters, and then for dessert, we're going to go with sweetmeats, because Alice again said that she learnt how to make sweetmeats when she was hanging out with the Wentworth sisters, and she obviously looks back fondly on those years when she was living the high life. So I'd go with something contemporary like quince marmalade and biscuits. So that would be the menu. Plenty of red wine. Yeah, and then just see how it all plays out.
Well, that sounds like a very well thought out plan for an evening. I think that's great. Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong there. Brilliant.
Well,
Oh
or
well,
very wrong.
yeah. Oh yeah, maybe. With those two, yes, especially. Um, wow. But what a remarkable story. What a remarkable lady, and in such an incredible time. So yes, I don't blame you being hooked on this, on learning more about it, and I feel the same way about some of the people I've been researching. You don't really want to stop, and there's no need to, because you can keep learning about them. Um, it's just wonderful, and I really want to thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed hearing all of your stories about Alice's life. Um, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Wow. Oh, I really enjoyed that. For more information about Alice Thornton and the Alice Thornton Books Collaborative Research Project, please visit thornton.kdl.kcl.ac.uk or click on the link under this video on the YouTube channel. As for me, I have 2 more scheduled talks coming up. Next month, I'll be back in the gorgeous and historic Leicester Guildhall to talk about a very different lady, Barbara Villiers, Charles II's most infamous mistress, on Sunday, May 24th at 2 p.m. And a few months after that, I'll be also giving a talk, but on sex, love, and scandal in Restoration Britain on September the 17th at Maidstone Museum in Kent. And you can book your tickets for both of these now, the links to which will be in the description section under this YouTube video and also on my various social media pages. Until next time, I'd like to thank you and remind you, don't forget to keep it Stuart.